The digital timer on the wall projected a stark crimson Yo317 onto the beige projection screen. It ticked down with the indifferent precision of a bomb. Alex Perez gripped the sides of the flimsy lectern, his knuckles turning the color of bone. He kept his eyes fixed on the 5 figures seated at the long folding table before him. The board of directors for the Whispering Pines Lake Homeowners Association. They sat like a tribunal, silhouetted against the wide plate glass windows of the community clubhouse. The placid blue of the lake, a cruel, beautiful backdrop to his public dissection. At the center of the table, Carol Thompson, the board president, regarded him with an expression of practiced neutrality. It was a look of serene, unassailable authority, perfected over countless meetings, just like this one. Her silver blonde hair was arranged in a flawless helmet. Her posture was impeccable, and the pen she held between her manicured fingers was perfectly still. "Mr. Perez," she said, her voice calm and devoid of emotion, yet carrying effortlessly across the silent, sterile room. "The Architectural Review Committee has reviewed your appeal regarding the violation on Lot 72. The board has considered your testimony." Alex felt the eyes of the 24 homeowners seated behind him. He didn't know any of them, but he could feel their collective curiosity, their judgment. He was the afternoon's entertainment, the latest nail to be hammered down by the board. "The violation stands," Carol announced, the words dropping into the silence like stones into a well. "The fine is upheld. You have 30 days to cure the violation and remit payment of $500. The next item on the agenda." The finality of it was suffocating. His 3 minutes of carefully prepared arguments, his pleas for reason, had evaporated into the recycled air of the clubhouse. He had been heard, processed, and dismissed. Alex took a slow, deliberate breath, forcing the tension from his shoulders. He would not give her the satisfaction of seeing him flustered. He would not let his voice shake. "Thank you for your time, Madam President, members of the board," he said, his tone even and formal. He met Carol's gaze directly, holding it. "Please note for the record that my formal objection is based on jurisdictional grounds. The board is asserting authority over a portion of my private property that is not, and has never been, designated as a common area or subject to a specific easement. This objection is pending my review of the official, county-recorded plat map for the Whispering Pines development." A faint flicker of something annoyance surprise crossed Carol's face, before the mask of placid control snapped back into place. She turned to the board secretary, a nervous-looking woman who was typing furiously on a laptop. "Marge, please note the owner's objection in the minutes," Carol said, a subtle dismissal. Her eyes returned to Alex, cool and unreadable. "The board's decision is final. Mr. Perez, we look forward to your prompt compliance." The gavel, a small polished block of wood, tapped the table with a sound that was no louder than a snapping twig, but carried the weight of absolute power. The hearing, his hearing, was over. Alex gathered his single file folder from the lectern, his movements measured and calm, and walked back toward his seat, the silent stares of his new neighbors following him like a physical force. The crimson timer on the wall was already being reset for the next homeowner on the agenda. The nightmare had begun 5 weeks earlier, on a crisp Saturday in late September. It had started not with a gavel, but with the quiet turning of a key. Alex had inherited the cabin on Lot 72 from his grandfather, Mateo Perez, a man whose presence had been a mountain in Alex's life. The probate process had been a slow, painful crawl through a mountain of paperwork. But now, finally, the property was his. The cabin wasn't large or modern. It was built of dark, fragrant cedar, nestled among towering pine trees on the shore of Whispering Pines Lake. It was the smell of pine needles and damp earth, the sound of water lapping against the shore, the memory of his grandfather's calloused hand, teaching him how to skip a stone across the glassy surface. It was his last, tangible connection to the man who had raised him. More than that, it was a sanctuary, a quiet refuge from his 60-hour work weeks as a logistics analyst for a national shipping firm. A world of spreadsheets, deadlines, and relentless pressure. On that first afternoon, he'd found the garden, tucked away on a small, 10-foot-wide strip of land running between the side of the cabin and the lakeshore. His grandfather had built a small masterpiece, a winding flagstone path, bordered by low-maintenance perennials, hostas, ferns, and hardy lake grasses, led to a simple stone bench. At the center, a single, magnificent Japanese maple stood, its leaves just beginning to turn a fiery scarlet. It was a memorial garden. Alex knew, without needing to be told, that Mateo had planted it for his grandmother, who had passed 3 years prior. It was a place of quiet contemplation, a living tribute. Alex sat on the bench, the silence of the woods enveloping him, and felt a sense of peace for the first time in months. He'd called his old college friend, Ben Carter. That evening, Ben was a real estate lawyer, a man who saw the world in terms of zoning codes, title disputes, and liability. "It's beautiful, man," Alex had said, describing the garden. "Abuelo's last project. It's perfect." "That's great. Alex, just be careful," Ben had warned, his voice shifting into its familiar, cautious lawyer tone. "You mentioned an HOA. Did you get the governing documents yet?" "They're sending a welcome packet or something," Alex said dismissively. "How bad can it be? They make sure people cut their grass." Ben had chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "That's how it starts. Listen to me. Read the CC&Rs. Read the bylaws. Read the rules and regulations. All of it. An HOA isn't your friendly neighborhood watch. It's a corporation. And you're a shareholder with obligations. Disputes aren't neighborly chats over a fence. They're corporate enforcement actions. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. And they have all the time and money in the world." Alex had brushed it off as Ben being overly dramatic. He was a lawyer. It was his job to see worst-case scenarios everywhere. 3 days later, the first paper cut arrived. It wasn't a welcome packet. It was an email. Dated October 5th. From a generic address, Compliance a Pristin Me GMT, com. The subject line was bland courtesy notice. Whispering Pines Lake, HOA. Dear Mr. Perez, welcome to Whispering Pines Lake. This email serves as a courtesy notice regarding a potential covenant violation on your property. Lot 72. An inspection has noted landscaping modifications within the community's designated view corridor that may not be in compliance with the association's governing documents. Please review Section 8.4.2 of the Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, CC&Rs, regarding the preservation of aesthetic harmony and natural views. We ask that you review your landscaping to ensure it complies with all community standards. Sincerely, Pristine Properties Management. On behalf of the Whispering Pines Lake HOA Board of Directors. The email was polite, vague, and deeply unsettling. View corridor, aesthetic harmony. He reread the words, a knot tightening in his stomach. The only new landscaping was his grandfather's memorial garden. Surely, they couldn't be talking about that. It had to be a mistake, a form letter sent to the new guy. He filed the email away, deciding to deal with it later. It was just a courtesy notice, after all. 10 days later, on October 15th, The illusion that this was a simple misunderstanding was shattered by the sharp rap of the mail carrier on his city apartment door. He was handed a stiff green and white envelope that required his signature. Certified mail. The return address was a P.O. box for Pristine Properties Management. Inside, the polite ambiguity of the email had been replaced by the cold, unforgiving language of a legal threat. Formal notice of violation. Date October 15, 2023. Property lot 7218, Whispering Pines Lane owner, Alex Perez. Tracking, NUR 9405 5036 99930 0594 8374 81. This letter serves as a formal notice of violation of the Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, CC&Rs, of the Whispering Pines Lake Homeowners Association. An inspection on October 12, 2023, confirmed a continuing violation of CC&R 8.4.2, which grants the Board of Directors authority over all common areas and limited common areas to preserve the aesthetic harmony and natural views of the community. The unauthorized installation of a garden, including a stone path, bench, and non-native plantings, Japanese maple, within the 10-foot 10-dead lakeside view corridor easement, constitutes a significant violation. Pursuant to the association's enforcement policy, a fine of $500 has been levied against your account. You are hereby directed to take the following corrective action within 14 days of the date of this notice. 1. Completely remove all elements of the unauthorized garden, including all plantings, stonework, and the bench. 2. Restore the area to its natural state with approved grass seed. Failure to cure this violation within the specified time frame will result in additional fines and may lead to further enforcement action by the association, up to and including the placement of a lien on your property. You have the right to request a hearing before the Board of Directors to contest this violation. Such a request must be made in writing within 10 days. The letter was signed, not by a person, but by the Whispering Pines Lake HOA Board of Directors. Alex read the letter 3 times. His hands were shaking. This wasn't a mistake. They were calling his grandfather's memorial garden a significant violation. They were demanding he destroy it. They were fining him $500 and threatening to put a lien on his home, his grandfather's home. The cold, impersonal legalese felt like a physical assault. The phrase, view corridor easement, leaped out at him. An easement was a formal legal claim, a right for someone else to use a part of your property for a specific purpose, if such a thing existed. It should have been in the title paperwork. He didn't remember seeing anything like that. Ben's words echoed in his mind. It's a corporation. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. This wasn't a paper cut. This was a scalpel, aimed directly at the heart of his inheritance, at the last piece of his grandfather he had left. The fight was real, and it had just been formally declared. Alex's first instinct was to resolve the issue with a simple, reasonable conversation. He spent the next week discovering that, in the world of HOA governance, reason was a foreign currency. His first call was to Pristine Properties Management. After navigating a labyrinthine phone tree, he was connected to a woman named Brenda in the compliance department. Her voice was a monotone of practiced apathy. "Yes, Mr. Perez. I have your file for Lot 72, she droned, the clicking of her keyboard audible over the line. It says here a formal violation notice was sent on the 15th regarding an unapproved landscaping installation." "That's why I'm calling," Alex said, keeping his tone polite but firm. "The installation is a small memorial garden my grandfather planted, and the letter mentions a view corridor easement. I've reviewed the closing documents, and there's no record of any such easement on my property." "Sir, The board has determined that the area is a common view corridor as defined in the CC&Rs. Our role is simply to enforce the board's decisions. But how can they just define part of my private property as a common area? That's not how property law works, Alex argued, his frustration mounting. Can you send me the document where this easement is officially recorded, like a plat map or a survey? There was a pause. We can send you the governing documents. Sir, the board's interpretation of those documents is the final word. If you wish to dispute the violation, you must request a hearing in writing. So you can't provide any proof that this easement actually exists. Sir, Brenda said, her voice tinged with annoyance, our client is the association, not the individual homeowners. You need to follow the process. The line went dead. Following the process, Alex sent a polite, professionally worded email directly to the board of directors' official address, explaining the situation and respectfully requesting the documentation for the alleged easement. 2 days later, a curt reply came, not from the board, but from Carol Thompson's personal email address. Mr. Perez, all official communications must be directed through our management company, Pristine Properties. They handle all compliance matters and records requests. Please follow the established procedures. Regards, Carol Thompson, President, WPLHOA Board. It was the perfect bureaucratic runaround. The management company deferred to the board, and the board deferred back to the management company. He was trapped in a loop of polite, impenetrable stonewalling. He formally requested a hearing and, as Brenda had promised, a digital copy of the governing documents. What he received was a single, 300-page searchable PDF. It was a dizzying collection of the Articles of Incorporation, the CC&Rs, the bylaws, and a dozen amendments and resolutions passed over the years. He spent an entire evening poring over it, his eyes burning from the screen. He found CC&R 408.4.2, the clause they kept citing. It was a masterpiece of intentional vagueness. Section 8.4.2, Aesthetic Control. The Board of Directors shall have the absolute right to control all aspects of the common areas, and may exercise aesthetic control over all private lots to the extent necessary to preserve the aesthetic harmony and natural views of the community as a whole. No landscaping, structure, or other modification shall be made that, in the sole discretion of the Board, detracts from this harmony. Sole discretion. The two words were a blank check for abuse. But nowhere in the 300 pages was there a plat map, a survey, or any legal description of a view corridor easement. The packet contained a cheap, illustrative map, a cartoonish drawing of the neighborhood with lots and street names. But it had a disclaimer at the bottom, for illustrative purposes only, not a legal survey. The one document that could prove his case, the official map, was conspicuously absent. On October 22nd, another certified letter arrived. It was the notice of hearing, scheduled for November 5th. Included was a small packet of the board's evidence against him. It contained grainy, time-stamped photos of his grandfather's garden taken from the lake, and a copy of board meeting minutes from September. Several paragraphs in the minutes were completely blacked out. A note at the bottom read, "Portions, redacted pursuant to attorney-client privilege regarding pending enforcement matters." They had discussed his property, planned this action, and were now hiding the details of that discussion behind a veil of legal privilege. Alex stared at the redacted document. This wasn't about a garden. This was a calculated, premeditated attack, and they were using the process itself as their primary weapon. Alex knew he was out of his depth. This wasn't a fight he could win with polite emails and phone calls. Ben, his lawyer friend, confirmed his fears. "They're using procedure to exhaust you," Ben said over the phone. They know the average person will give up when faced with this level of bureaucratic nonsense. They're counting on it. You need something they can't ignore. Something official. Like the real plat map, Alex said. Exactly. And you need someone who knows how to find it and, more importantly, how to read it. I know a guy. He's a retired county surveyor. A bit of a crank. But he's a legend with property records. His name is George Stavros. George Stavros's office was a cramped, dusty room above a hardware store, smelling of old paper and pipe tobacco. He was a portly man in his late 60s, with a magnificent white mustache and eyes that twinkled with cantankerous intelligence. He listened to Alex's story without interruption, peering at the violation notice and the redacted minutes over a pair of half-moon glasses. Ah, an HOA. George grunted, rolling the acronym around in his mouth like a piece of bad candy. Private governments run by petty tyrants with too much time on their hands. View corridor easement, declared by board interpretation. That's rich. Let's see what the county has to say about it. The next day, they were at the county recorder's office, a place that time seemed to have forgotten. The air was thick with the musty smell of archival paper. George navigated the rows of massive, leather-bound plat books and racks of microfilm with the confidence of a seasoned explorer. They don't make it easy for you, George muttered, pulling a heavy book from a shelf. They prefer you use the digitized system, but the scans can be incomplete. The real truth is always on the original paper. He found it within an hour. The official plat map for the Whispering Pines development, filed in 1988. He unrolled the large, brittle sheet of linen paper onto a viewing table. The lines were drawn in crisp, black ink, the surveyor's seal, and the county recorder's stamp clear and authoritative in the bottom corner. George ran a gnarled finger along the property lines for Lot 72. There's your lot, he said, tapping the paper. See, the boundaries are clearly defined. Goes right to the high water mark of the lake. There are utility easements marked here, and a drainage easement over there. He scanned the entire document, his finger tracing every line and notation. He then pulled the original deed for Lot 72 from a separate file. He read it slowly, his lips moving silently. Finally, he looked up at Alex, a grim smile playing under his mustache. The first piece of the puzzle had been found. While George worked his magic with the maps, Alex decided to try a different approach, talking to his neighbors. He started with the house next door, a tidy cottage with a perfectly manicured lawn. The door was opened by a small, white-haired woman with kind, worried eyes. She introduced herself as Eleanor Gable. "Oh, you're Mateo's grandson," she said, her face lighting up. "He was such a wonderful man. I miss seeing him work in his garden." Alex's heart leaped. "You mean the memorial garden by the lake?" "Of course. He spent all last spring on it. Said it was for his dear Maria. It's the loveliest spot on the whole lake." Emboldened, Alex explained the violation notice. Mrs. Gable's warm expression clouded over. She glanced nervously back into her house before leaning closer to Alex. "It's Carol Thompson," she whispered, as if the name itself were dangerous. "The board was fine for years, just volunteers helping out. But since she became president 2 years ago, it's become something else. She's very aggressive, very selective." "Selective how?" Mrs. Gable sighed, wringing her hands. She made the Millers next door rip out their new $20,000 stone patio because it was 2 inches over the setback line, a line nobody had ever enforced. But when her friend on the board built a huge deck without a permit, she called it a minor non-compliance and waived the fine. Last month, I got a violation notice for my mailbox. She pointed to a standard black mailbox at the end of her driveway. The rules say they have to be earth-toned. She claims black is not an earth tone. I have to repaint it, or pay a $100 fine." Her voice trembled with a mixture of fear and indignation. She was terrified of the HOA's power, of the fines, of the threats. Carol Thompson wasn't just enforcing rules. She was using them to control and intimidate her neighbors. Mrs. Gable's story clicked into place with the missing map and the redacted minutes. This wasn't random. It was targeted. But he still didn't understand why he was the target. The answer was waiting for him back in George's dusty office. "Well, kid," George announced as Alex walked back into his office. "The county agrees with you." He held up a certified copy of the plat map, the official seal gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The disputed 10-foot strip of land is unequivocally 100% part of Lot 72. There is no view corridor easement, no common area designation, no recorded restriction of any kind on that plat or on your deed. Legally speaking, their claim is built on thin air. The relief that washed over Alex was immense. This was it. The smoking gun. The irrefutable proof. "So, I just show them this at the hearing. And it's over." George snorted. "It should be. But with people like this, facts are often just an inconvenience. They'll argue their sole discretion clause gives them the right to invent rules. It doesn't. But they'll force you to spend a fortune on a lawyer to prove it in court. This map is your shield. But you still need a sword." The sword arrived in the form of a phone call from Ben later that evening. Alex had sent him copies of all the documents, including the HOA's original Articles of Incorporation from 1988. "Alex, I think I found something," Ben said, his voice tight with excitement. "I was looking at the list of the original developers and the first board members. Does the name Mark Thompson mean anything to you?" "No. Should it?" "He's Carol Thompson's husband. He's listed as one of the founding members of the HOA. But that's not the interesting part. I ran a business search on him for 15 years, until he retired. Mark Thompson was the CEO of Sterling Logistics." The name hit Alex like a punch to the gut. Sterling Logistics, 5 years ago. Alex had been a mid-level manager there, fresh out of business school and eager to make his mark. "Oh my God," Alex whispered, sinking into a chair. "You're remembering now." "Aren't you?" Ben said. "Who did you have to fire from the summer intern program at Sterling?" The memory came rushing back in perfect, painful clarity. A cocky, entitled intern who had been caught downloading proprietary shipping manifests and trying to sell them to a competitor. A kid who had shown no remorse, who had sneered that his father would make this all go away. "Sean," Alex said, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. "Sean Thompson. Carol and Mark Thompson's son." Ben finished for him. "You didn't just fire him. Alex, your report to HR got him formally disciplined for corporate espionage. It killed his chances of getting hired anywhere else in the industry. The Thompsons had to pull every string they had just to keep him from facing charges." Suddenly, everything snapped into focus. The laser-like targeting of his property, the immediate escalation from a courtesy notice to a formal violation, the stonewalling, the redacted minutes, Carol Thompson's cool, unreadable expression. This had never been about a garden. It had never been about a view. It was a 5-year-old grudge, nurtured and sharpened into a weapon. Carol Thompson wasn't just a petty tyrant enforcing arbitrary rules on her neighbors. She was a mother seeking vengeance, using the full, crushing weight of the Whispering Pines Lake Homeowners Association to ruin the man who had, in her eyes, ruined her son's life. He wasn't just fighting an HOA, he was fighting a vendetta. The moment Carol Thompson realized Alex was not going to simply roll over, the war escalated. Her polite, procedural attacks gave way to a campaign of overt aggression designed to isolate and overwhelm him. 2 days after his disastrous Nova 5th hearing, An email went out to the entire Whispering Pines community. Subject: Important Community. Update and notice of special meeting. Dear homeowners, as you know, your board of directors works tirelessly to uphold the standards that protect our property values and preserve the natural beauty of our community. Unfortunately, we are facing a challenge with a new owner on Lot 72 who has refused to comply with the community's long-standing aesthetic standards, as outlined in CC&R Figure 8.4.2. Despite the board's good faith efforts to resolve the matter amicably, the owner has rejected the board's authority and has indicated an intent to pursue costly legal action against our association action that would be funded by your dues. Therefore, the board has scheduled a special meeting of the members for November 29th at 7:00 p.m. in the community clubhouse. The email went on to list 2 agenda items for the meeting. The first was a proposed amendment to the CC&Rs that would formally define the 10-foot strip adjacent to the lake on all lakefront lots as a common area view corridor, effectively codifying the very rule she was trying to enforce against him retroactively. The second was a vote to authorize a special assessment to fund the legal fees required to defend the association against frivolous litigation by non-compliant homeowners. It was a brilliant, vicious trap. She was painting him as the aggressor, a rich outsider trying to break the rules and force his neighbors to pay for it. She was using his own fight against him to rally the community to her side and give her even more power. The smear campaign began in earnest. Carol sent out follow-up emails with carefully cropped photos of the garden, calling it an unapproved construction that threatened the pristine character of our lakefront. She forwarded his polite but firm emails to a select group of neighbors, presented out of context to make him seem demanding and unreasonable. Whispers started. He was the guy who thought the rules didn't apply to him. He was the reason everyone's dues might go up. When Alex walked down to his dock to check on his boat cover, a man power washing his deck 2 houses down shot him a dirty look and pointedly turned his back. The friendly wave he offered to a woman getting her mail was met with a cold stare. He was being systematically alienated from a community he hadn't even had a chance to join. He felt a profound sense of isolation. This quiet cabin, his intended sanctuary, had become a battleground. Carol was turning his refuge into a prison. He spent his nights poring over the HOA documents, the plat map, and his notes, preparing for the special meeting. Ben warned him that these meetings were often kangaroo courts, carefully orchestrated events designed to rubber stamp the board's agenda. "You'll get 5 minutes to speak." "Maybe," Ben cautioned. "They'll control the microphone. They'll control the agenda. And they'll have their supporters planted in the audience. You can't just win on the facts. Alex, you have to win over the people. You have to show them that this isn't just about you. It's about them, too." Ben's words gave him an idea. He thought of Mrs. Gable and her mailbox. He went back to the 300-page PDF of the governing documents and started searching, not just for rules about landscaping, but for other vague, all-powerful clauses. He found one concerning mailboxes in the architectural guidelines. All mailboxes must be of a uniform style and color, primarily consisting of subdued, earth-toned colors, as approved by the ARC. There was no definition of earth-toned. Like Figure 8.4.2, it was a blank check for selective enforcement. He realized his only chance was to turn the tables. He had to expose Carol's vendetta not as a personal attack on him, but as a pattern of abuse that threatened every single person in that room. He wouldn't just be defending his garden. He would be defending Mrs. Gable's mailbox. He would be defending them all. His presentation for the special meeting began to take shape. No longer just a legal defense, but a plea for community solidarity against tyranny. He just had to pray they would listen. The clubhouse on the evening of November 29th was packed. Every seat was filled. with homeowners standing along the back and side walls. The air was thick with a mixture of curiosity, resentment, and the cloying scent of cheap coffee from a large urn in the corner. Alex found a seat in the back, his laptop bag clutched in his hand, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. Carol Thompson and the other 4 board members sat at the front table, looking confident and serene. She opened the meeting with practiced efficiency, moving through the initial agenda items with a brisk pace. Then, she arrived at the main event. We now move to the proposed amendment to the CC&Rs regarding the establishment of common area view corridors. She announced, as outlined in the meeting notice, this is a necessary clarification to protect our shared visual enjoyment of the lake. Before we open the floor for discussion, we have afforded the owner of Lot 72, Mr. Perez, 5 minutes to address the community. As if on cue, a large digital timer was projected onto the screen beside the podium, its numbers a glowing red arrow 500. Alex walked to the front of the room, his footsteps echoing in the tense silence. He connected his laptop to the projector, his presentation appearing on the screen. He took a deep breath and looked out, not at the board, but at the faces in the crowd. "Good evening," he began, his voice steady. "My name is Alex Perez. My grandfather, Mateo Perez, built the cabin on Lot 72 30 years ago. I inherited it this fall. Many of you knew him. What you may not know is that the board is demanding I demolish a small memorial garden he planted for my grandmother." He clicked to the first slide, a beautiful, sun-dappled photo of the garden. They are doing so under the authority of CC&R, Section 8.4.2. The text of the vague clause appeared on the screen. As you can see, it gives the board sole discretion to preserve aesthetic harmony. It's a very powerful clause. In preparing for my hearing, the board provided me with their evidence, which included minutes from their September meeting. He clicked again. A slide showed the redacted minutes the board had sent him, with thick black bars obscuring the text. They cited attorney-client privilege. But the law in this state is clear: homeowners have a right to review the minutes of board meetings. So, I filed a formal records request. The next click was dramatic. The black bars dissolved, revealing the unredacted text beneath. The slide now showed the full minutes, with the key sentences highlighted in yellow. Motion to begin enforcement proceedings against Lot 72 upon transfer of title. The unapproved garden offers a clear test case for establishing board precedent over lakeside aesthetics under 8.4.2. Carol will draft the initial notice. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "As you can see," Alex said calmly, "this wasn't a reaction to a complaint. It was a premeditated plan to use my property, before I even owned it, as a test case to expand the board's power." But the central question is, what power do they actually have? The board claims my grandfather's garden is in a view corridor easement. An easement is a legal instrument, recorded with the county. It is not something a board can simply invent. He clicked to the next slide. A high-resolution image of the official, county-stamped plat map filled the screen. He used a laser pointer to trace the lines of his property. "This is the official plat map for our community, obtained from the county recorder's office. As you can see, there is no easement on my property. None." He clicked again, showing the text of his deed. "And there is no mention of it in my deed. This 10-foot strip of land is, and always has been, private property. The board's claim has no basis in legal reality." The room was utterly silent now. He had them. He could feel the tide turning. He glanced at his notes for the final. Devastating blow: the connection to Sean Thompson. The revenge motive. This was the moment to expose Carol personally, to reveal the petty grudge that started it all. But, as his eyes scanned the audience, They landed on Mrs. Gable. She was sitting in the third row, clutching her purse, her face a mask of terror. She was looking at Carol, who was now staring daggers not at Alex, but at her. In that instant, Alex understood. If he made this personal, Carol would have nothing left to lose. She would retaliate, and her first victim would be the frail, frightened woman who had dared to speak to him. He made a split-second decision. He sacrificed his checkmate. He pivoted. "This isn't just about my garden," Alex said, his voice ringing with a new urgency. "It's about how vague rules and sole discretion can be used against any of us." He clicked to his final slide. On one side was the text of FOA 8.4.2. On the other was the rule about mailboxes needing to be earth-toned. The board is using the same arbitrary authority to fine another homeowner, a widow who has lived here since this community was built, because they have decided that her black mailbox is not an earth tone. He looked directly at the crowd, at his neighbors. Today, it's my garden and her mailbox. Tomorrow, what will it be? The color of your trim, the brand of your barbecue, the type of flowers you plant if this amendment passes. You are giving the board the power to redraw your property lines based on their whim. I have to ask you, who will be next? The timer was a frantic blur of red. As it flashed, a man in the front row, the same man who had snubbed Alex by the lake, stood up. "I have a question for the board," he said, his voice booming through the room. "The man just showed us the official county plat map. He showed us your own minutes proving you targeted him. And he's right about Mrs. Gable's mailbox. My wife was on the ARC, and she quit because Carol was trying to do the same thing with holiday decorations. We demand an answer. Are you asserting authority you don't legally possess?" The room erupted. People started shouting questions from all corners. All eyes turned to the front table. Carol Thompson's face, for the first time, was no longer a mask of placid control. It was a pale, tight knot of fury. Her composure finally, publicly, cracked. The gavel she gripped in her hand was trembling. The rest of the meeting descended into chaos. The vote on the amendment was never called. Homeowners swarmed the front table, demanding answers the board couldn't provide. In the tumultuous aftermath, the man who had first stood up began circulating a sheet of paper. It was a petition to hold a special election to recall the entire board of directors. It filled with signatures within minutes. The following morning, Alex received a call from a senior partner at Pristine Properties Management. The man sounded panicked. His company's reputation was on the line, facing potential liability for enforcing illegal fines based on a non-existent easement. The management company had formally advised the board to stand down. By noon, an official email landed in Alex's inbox. The violation notice against Lot 72 was rescinded. The $500 fine was voided. A separate email, CC'd to Mrs. Gable, informed her that upon further review, black was now considered an acceptable earth tone, and her mailbox was in full compliance. That afternoon, Ben sent a formal cease and desist letter to Carol Thompson personally, on behalf of Alex. It warned her that any further communication, smear tactics, or attempts at retribution would be met with a lawsuit for harassment and slander. For the first time in weeks, the threat felt real, and it was pointed in the other direction. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted. 3 weeks later, the recall election was a landslide. A new 5-member board was elected, comprised of homeowners who had been vocal at the special meeting, including the man who had first stood up for Alex. The atmosphere in Whispering Pines had changed overnight from one of suspicion and fear to one of collaborative reform. The new board president offered Alex a seat, but he politely declined. "I'm better at fixing problems than being part of a bureaucracy," he said. Instead, he volunteered to chair a temporary committee to rewrite the sections of the governing documents that contained vague, subjective language. His first act was to draft a new rule that explicitly defined aesthetic harmony and required any architectural enforcement to be based on clear, objective, and published standards. The era of sole discretion was over. The cabin was finally his sanctuary. He spent his weekends sitting in his grandfather's garden, watching the light change on the lake, the peace of the place slowly healing the stress of the past 2 months. The fight had been brutal, but it had forged an unexpected bond between him and his community. Mrs. Gable brought him a homemade apple pie. Neighbors who had once glared at him now stopped by to chat. He had defended more than his property. He had helped restore the very idea of neighborliness to Whispering Pines. The final surprise came on a Tuesday afternoon in a phone call from George, the retired surveyor. "You're not going to believe this, kid," George said, a note of pure, unadulterated glee in his voice. "I got curious after that meeting. A woman with that much nerve usually has a financial angle. So, on a hunch, I looked up the vendor contracts for the HOA for the past 2 years." And Alex asked, "And?" George crowed. "The HOA's exclusive landscaping contractor, the company they use for all common area maintenance and recommend to residents for compliance work, is a company called Lakeside Scapes, LLC. "Okay." "The owner of Lakeside Scapes, LLC, George said, drawing out the suspense, is a man named Daniel Miller, who, after a bit more digging, turns out to be Carol Thompson's brother." Alex sat down on the stone bench in the garden. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The patio the Millers had to rip out, Mrs. Gable's mailbox needing to be repainted, his own garden needing to be replaced with approved grass seed. Every violation was a potential job for her brother's company. It wasn't just a vendetta. It was a kickback scheme. The revelation was turned over to the new board, and then to the county prosecutor. The investigation exposed years of fraudulent contracts and bid rigging. Carol Thompson's tyrannical reign didn't just end with her being voted off the board. It ended with criminal indictments. Her quest for petty revenge over her son's firing had unraveled a far more sordid and profitable crime, ensuring that she wouldn't just lose her power, she would lose her freedom. Alex looked out at the water, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the Japanese maple. The fight was truly, finally over. He had honored his grandfather's memory, not just by saving his garden, but by standing up for what was right, transforming a personal battle into a victory for an entire community.